Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson.
Insert Democrat socialist here.
Runs the Democratic House floor for 30 plus years running. He's promising this and he's stealing that. Where can you get that kind of money? He's using your house like his own piggy bank. You ought to know by now. You can pay off your house here in Illinois, but you can never keep up with the taxes. Oh, how it's always been the plan to have a taxpayer pay, no doubt. Not a matter of if anymore, but when. You're moving out. I said, when you're moving out.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. That theme music means it's time for our weekly confab with Ted Dabrowski, president of Wirepoints.org, all things Illinois policy related. Before we get to Ted, let's hear from Governor Spalding, because we're living in Candide in Illinois.
Violent crime actually has been coming down for 3 years, but in particular over the last year, violent crime is coming down. I know everybody wants to go back and focus on, Citadel leaving, but the truth is that we've attracted seriously like a half a dozen pretty significant expansions and or new headquarters.
Oh, really? Which expansions?
So crime is down, businesses are up, the state is growing, the pension funds are fine, the state is solvent.
Oh, yeah, we've got the Safety Act in place. Everything's great.
For more on this, Ted, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning, Dan. Good morning, Amy. Yeah, I think we better get used to this. He's really, I think, making this pitch for running for president. If Biden steps out of the way, we'll see if that happens. But he's certainly doing his speeches have all been covering how good Illinois does. He started his not-for-profit efforts with his Think Big not-for-profit. So we're going to hear more and more about how well Illinois is doing and how Illinois could be the model for America.
There's no question. I mean, it's an economic powerhouse. It reminds me of Bill Clinton talking about Arkansas when he was running for president 30 years ago, what a boom town that state was. But, of course, the data, I mean, not that there's particular concern about the evidence or lack thereof to support the claims he's making, but the data says that what the governor is saying, with all due respect, and all due respect is not much respect, what he's saying is just wrong. I mean, it's the same thing that again, the state is growing. We're not losing population. Pay no attention to the loss of a congresshuman. Right. So it's just, and it seems that probably there's enough people parroting these fantasies and who are committed to self-delusion that he'll get away with it, at least in Illinois. I don't think so nationally.
Yeah, he'll get away with it here for a while because the press will continue to back him. But usually he's careful about the stuff he says. But for me, he's getting sloppy. He's starting to say things that just aren't true. And if you look at, I got the numbers in front of me. If you look at the Chicago data on crime, clearly everything is up except for murders. Murders are down 11% compared to last year. He won't tell you that in Philly. In the other big cities, he won't tell you that Philadelphia is down 20% or Houston is down 21% or Los Angeles 19%. He won't tell you that, but yes, but the reality is that crimes overall are up on everything. The criminal sexual assaults, they're up 2%, robberies up 24%, aggravated battery up 5%. Of course, the less dangerous ones, like motor vehicle theft, which I think every one of those is an opportunity for violence, is up 50% compared to last year. So, overall, major crimes are up 20%. So he can try to play his game with I don't know what stats he's cherry picking, but and then if you go back to 2019, everything is way up. Murders are still up 23% over 2019 this year. So, he can say what he wants, but it's just not true.
And I don't know if you saw this, Ted, but they're even cutting through the club. You know, all these, our 19th district and all the other districts were handing out the club, from the 80s that you'd put on your steering wheel. Well, they're just cutting the steering wheel and then sliding the club off and stealing those cars anyway. So, I mean, if you need a nudge to care about who the next Cook County State's Attorney is, what happened last night? I mean, we had an off-duty police officer. He was stripped of his badge. They later found it on the ground, but he was robbed by 4 men who jumped out of a black Nissan sedan, and they had guns, and one had a rifle, and they robbed him. And then they went on and robbed, 9 other people within a 2-hour time span.
Dan and Amy, this is getting crazy, and I think you mentioned the Wall Street Journal article about the retail theft and how workers are just having to watch the people just walk in and take stuff. We're doing the same thing in the streets now. We're letting these guys, 4 guys with guns and cars run around and just every 5 minutes stop at a new spot, rob somebody, and then just drive down the street and do it again. And they're doing it 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. It is absurd and crazy. And I don't know when we jump up and down and do something about it. But I usually don't support the unions and their strikes. But what the Wall Street Journal article says there is that they're finally suing companies for not doing something about the retail theft because it's putting people at risk. And it's fascinating to me, the piece we just wrote, this amount of with impunity, they're just walking around and doing whatever the hell they want, and we're watching it. And then Pritzker has the gall to say that crime is down.
I saw over at your site that you sat down with the BBC. The BBC did a little piece about Illinois out-migration. It apparently is happening despite what Jelly Belly says about it, and in-migration in states like Florida. How'd that go?
Well, it was interesting because I think the BBC started out with a notion that, there's a bunch of, very liberal people leaving Florida and coming to Illinois, and vice versa. You got the conservatives moving down to Florida. But it was interesting after they looked at all the stuff. Yes, they covered a few people moving to Illinois, but I think they realized that the overwhelming numbers are the other way. It's why Florida grew by almost 3 million people in the last decade, and Illinois shrunk. And why Texas grew by 4 million people and Illinois shrunk. So they can try to analyze how many liberals are moving to Illinois, but the overwhelming evidence is the flight is entirely the other way.
When we left you last week, you were off to Manteno for a rally and conversation about the location there of that Goshen Chinese Communist Party-backed electric battery facility that's being underwritten by federal and state governments significantly. So how did that go? Give us a summary of what happened.
Yes, my colleague Mark was the one that spoke at the rally, along with Jeannie Ives and a lawyer who is representing the people of Manteno who are opposing it. And the pushback is strong. The people don't want it. The polls show all that. Of course, the Manteno government is they brought in all the major corporate players that we know who support this. It's all good jobs. It's good for the people, kind of thing. There's still discussions going on about the zoning. The zoning has to change. They pushed that decision off from that meeting to a next one. I think my concern is the system is so set up and everybody's in what do you want to say, in cahoots that it's going to be hard to turn down. But we'll see if the people of Manteno were strong enough to make a lot of noise.
What the usual corporate suspects that are supporting it? Like, can you give us some examples of who was on hand?
Well, you've got groups like the IMA, right, the Illinois Manufacturers Association, all that, right? They are, and types like that Chicagoland Chamber. They're all going to say this is great. They're not going to go against Pritzker. Everybody ignores that it's taking $536 million in state subsidies to get Goshen here. They're ignoring that you're talking about billions of dollars from federal government that are helping Goshen get here. They don't care about that stuff. They're going to play the political game so that Pritzker can say, hey, we've done a great job, look at us, ignoring the fact that manufacturing jobs under Pritzker are still down 5% as he took office, one of the worst in the country.
We talked about this a bit yesterday, but I think it bears a revisit with you, which is the Wall Street Journal finally catching up with the story that we reported here over the summer about Evanston Township High School having segregated classes, particularly as it pertains to AP prep classes for the AP Math test, the AP History test, and so forth. Math and reading, I think, were the it was math and like language arts, I think, were the two main ones essentially. Separating black students, black teacher, Latino students, Latino teacher, because they're trying to close the achievement gap, they say. This initially, of course, this was denied that this was not happening. Then they made a slight wording change to the catalog that detailed the classes available. And now we have the Wall Street Journal, several months later, doing an expose on it, and all the DI consultants and the school board members in ETHS, and of course all these race hustling administrators at ETHS are all now out and proud about it, and this is the evasive action we're taking, and to try to overcome the scourge of whiteness, and so on and so forth. And I just but by the way, I also understand that the president of the school board, Pat Savage Williams, I think is her name, is the DI coordinator for New Trier. Isn't that interesting? Maybe New Trier should do the same thing, although it'd be kind of lonely for the two minority students there. Anyway, the comment on the continued race hustle in K through 12 in Illinois, since you spent so much time analyzing the data, writing about it, we spent so much time talking about it. The state report card we spent a lot of time talking about, just abysmal. And this is the response you get from one of the bigger school systems in the metropolitan area.
Yeah, I think that the big concern I have is how poorly they're managing, the true expectations of kids, and then trying to demand excellence. And instead, they're so obsessed about equity. And the story that needs to be told more and more is how places like in Decatur, they've reached equity. But it's not because they've got blacks scoring much higher. It's because they've got whites scoring much lower. And this is what happens when you fail to educate and fail to have merit, and demand excellence and achievement. And in Decatur public schools, fascinating. There's about 1,700 of them, 2,000 maybe, white kids in the Decatur public schools, and only 12%. And I refuse to believe this, but only 12% of whites in Decatur can read at grade level. And that's kind of close to whatever it is, the 6% for blacks. So they've achieved equity, right? It's just that none of them can read. And if we're not careful, that's the same kind of stuff we'll do by just dumbing down everything. So move over to Evanston. I remember it's been a few years now, but I remember analyzing a report that was done by Evanston, one of the schools in the district. And the first paragraph of their analysis of the education gaps was, in the first paragraph, they blamed white supremacy. They said, is white supremacy that's doing that? And that shocked me. And that led to the Civil Rights Commission coming in and trying to challenge Evanston. But here you go, you've got this. They've continued on. They're segregating, which is unbelievable. They're doing segregation. They're doing these affinity groups, and it can't be good, right? Because if you look at what's happening in the rest of the state, you're just setting different standards for different kids, and the standards that these black kids or these Latino kids need to have is the standards of excellence and merit, not of some non-white something. And what's interesting, you mentioned Pat Savage Williams. Yes, she is the DI coordinator at New Trier. And if you look there, this is probably the message for every school district, for every parent listening. This stuff's happening in your school district. At New Trier, we've got these affinity groups that meet now. And these are after-school groups. And these affinity groups allow students who share an identity, what's called a marginalized identity, to get together. And so the groups are, for example, Black Student Alliance, Latinx, Mixed Race, Muslim Student Association, Young Asians with Power, and my favorite one is the White Anti-Racist Affinity Group.
The White
Anti-Racist
Group?
Yeah, they spend all their time self-flagellating. They just meet to whip themselves over their whiteness. Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
I watched a video of them describing that. It's crazy.
Well, like some of this stuff, I don't want to take it too far. You have the. I mean, I remember on campus in college, you have the black student groups, and as you were mentioning, the other affinity groups, or you have the black fraternities and black sororities and stuff. So okay, fine, that's fine. But the segregating classes and promoting the segregation of classes and the as I want to say, not so soft bigotry of low expectations in the direction of minority students, the patronizing attitudes from these anti-racist quote unquote whites, as well as from the race hustlers who make a living by creating boogeymen. That's where the line crosses, right? I mean, Bob Woodson says this too. He says it's not about you can do blacks only something, but if it's black students or black adults getting together to do something in community with one another, fine. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about basically end running Brown v. Board of Education and going back to separate but equal, or separate is how we get to equal. I mean, it is such poison. It is so nonsensical. It is completely unsupported by any sort of scholarship. And yet it just passes with not much mention or concern.
Well, yeah, and Dan, it's important. Yeah, I'm not against groups meeting all the time, whatever, right? Everybody should be able to do what they want. But a lot of these are school sponsored, and they have an agenda.
Yeah.
If you follow Pat Savage Williams, her goals is all about this equity obsession, and and it's also funny too when you start seeing groups, but then you have this white anti-racist affinity group that has to fit into this thing that is focused on understanding whiteness, exploring white culture, white racial identity, and anti-racist equity work. It's all part of that other game, and it has nothing to do with the camaraderie of a group, or even blacks getting together to understand how to perform better. It's much more of a grievance groups, really.
Absolutely. Ted Dabrowski, president of Wirepoints, wirepoints.org, all things Illinois policy related. Thanks, Ted.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Amy Jacobson and Dan Proft here, and we want to tell you about an opportunity for you to promote your business and to make a difference this Christmas season.
We're talking about our Food for the Poor Business Benefactor Program. We've partnered with Food for the Poor to provide life-saving food for thousands of children and their families in Latin America and the Caribbean during this season of economic decline.